Okay. This is an incredible little machine. You carry access to basically all of the world's information and misinformation, which means when you want to make a decision and you want it to be a good one, you need to have good information. So the question is, can you find the good stuff in the sea of bad stuff? I created a class to teach Gen Ed students, science students, so these are college students who don't want to be science majors when they grow up, how to think critically, information literacy, and science literacy. And I know my students are coming from an environment where they don't even understand what it is that they're looking at. I was teaching them science content, and with as fascinating as I think that information is, they trusted that I was providing them good information. And when they left there, how did they know who to trust? So I created the class before the pandemic, and in the pandemic, we saw science play out in real time. And I really hope that the skills were transferable to real life. The course that I teach focuses on 3 skills and 3 strategies. So critical thinking, this is the ability to find information and make wise decisions from that information. Information literacy is to be able to find it, both primary, secondary, and so on. And then science literacy is understanding how the scientific community produces knowledge, and then being able to use that knowledge effectively to make better decisions. Now, I've said teach skills, not facts. I mean, of course, facts are important, but facts change. Facts are look-upable, right? Facts are forgettable. I often show my students this meme of the Krebs cycle, where when the stages of learning the Krebs cycle are learn the Krebs cycle, forget the Krebs cycle, learn the, right? I've taught that thing many times, and I still have to look up the damn thing every single time. So facts are important. But again, I teach primarily non-science majors, and I'd rather them be able to understand what they're looking at and figure out what's trustworthy. So I use misinformation in the classroom. And yes, that is perineum sunning, or butt sunning, if you rather. The TikTok videos are brilliant. I would strongly encourage you to go on there and see them. So I use misinformation in the classroom, partly because if I don't show my students what unreliable information looks like, how can they figure out what reliable information looks like? And importantly, I start with non-triggering misinformation. There are a plethora of science issues that are based on misunderstanding, often deliberate misunderstanding of scientific consensuses, like climate change denial, vaccine denial, GMO denial, evolution denial. And all of those, if I go into a classroom and start with that, I'm going to trigger students where that's an important issue for them. So what I want them to do is to practice. I give them funny stuff, skills to be able to practice. I'm going to talk about the toolkit in a second. And then I want them to learn how misinformation works, because there's fingerprints of misinformation, whether it's denial or pseudoscience, propaganda, fake news. There's telltale signs. So I want them to learn how it works and then get their training wheels to a point where we can take them off and let them go with more potentially controversial to them, information. I move a lot. It's kind of a problem. So I created a toolkit to help them do this. My intention was to create something that was a combination of science reasoning skills, critical thinking skills, so that when I tell them, evaluate this claim, then they know where to start, right? There's a structured place to start. I start this early in the semester. I'm going to go through it in a half an hour. I do not do that with students. I take about a week. And then, through the rest of the semester, I dive into different sections a bit more. And importantly, I'm letting them practice along the way, both with good information and not so good information. Also, before starting this toolkit, it's important to clarify the claim and remember to be skeptical. So skepticism is one of those, as we all know, it's one of those words that gets misinterpreted a lot. And I'm trying to reclaim it to show them how powerful it is. The point here is if you don't stop and ask yourself, is this true? You won't check. So you have to turn on that light in your head, that alarm, and listen to it when it goes off. And this is really hard, because the hardest time to be skeptical is when misinformation confirms our biases. But if we think it's true, then why would we check? Or when it triggers our emotions, right? So it makes us angry, afraid. Quite frankly, if it makes us laugh, that's why we fall for satire. I originally got this idea from James Lett, who published a toolkit in Skeptical Inquirer in 1990. It was a great toolkit. And I realized through the process of using the toolkit, my students were born like 15 years, 10 years after the toolkit was published. And a lot of the examples weren't necessarily relevant to them. The media environment has changed a lot since then, in the misinformation environment. So I created a new toolkit with Lett's permission, and I wanted to make a memorable acronym. So let's start. Let's say that you're come face-to-face with a claim, and you're trying to figure out, is it true? Skeptical radar on, you're going to ask yourself this question. The first thing you want to ask yourself is, can I prove it wrong? So a lot of us, what we do when we think something is true is, well, I think this is true. I'm going to go out and look for evidence that shows that this is true. The problem with that is you can find information, evidence, that confirms nearly anything. So a better question to ask yourself is, can I prove it wrong? Now, Karl Popper famously defined the difference between science and pseudoscience as falsifiability. I know it has some issues, but quite frankly, it's a really good first step to determining if a claim is even testable. So I'm going to talk about a few examples here, show you some examples throughout. I've tried to scaffold this as much as possible to the types of claims that aren't falsifiable. So you can see them here: supernatural, vague, subjective, and excuse making. So I'm going to show you examples of all of those. Okay, so I'm a Taurus. Look, if I put any horoscope on that at all, like any star sign, and showed it to you and asked you, does this apply to you? I mean, probably, yeah. I mean, these are Barnum statements, and it produces the Barnum effect. But that's the thing, they're vague statements. The issue with vague statements is that they allow us to put what we want into the statement. Its vagueness is actually part of its power over us. Let me give you some more examples in a second. Okay, Reiki. Think about these words for a second and ask yourself, how would I test this? Reiki healing heals by flowing through the affected parts of the energy field and charging them with positive energy. It raises the vibratory level of the energy field. And look, I don't need to keep going. You get the point. So energy medicine are all based on these vague energy claims. Look, when scientists use the word energy, they mean something. It's something that's measurable, repeatable, observable. And there is energy used in medicine. That's what X-rays and such are. This doesn't mean anything. Supplements, by law, can't make specific health claims. So what they do is they put vague things up there. Things like boosts the immune system, promotes health and well-being. Now, if I have a bias towards maybe natural medicine or not anti-big pharma, I might be scrolling through the aisles of a health food store or pharmacy and go, you know, that sounds brilliant. There's no side effects. It's all natural. And if strengthens immune system, that sounds brilliant, but it doesn't actually mean anything. So, vague statements. Okay, if any of you were here last year, David Robert Grimes gave a brilliant talk, and his book is absolutely amazing. I have him to thank for this. Pythagoras actually thought when you farted, you lost part of your soul. I mean, breath was spirit, and so the reasoning goes, when you fart, you lose part of your soul. So he wouldn't eat beans. I use this with my students. I'll start with, all right, we're going to talk about evaluating claims. I don't even need to use falsifiability. And I'll say, Pythagoras thought when you farted, you lost your soul. And they chuckle. And I go, okay, test that. So So what usually follows is they're still chuckling amongst themselves, and then they'll go, do I lose my soul when I burp too? I don't know. Well, dogs fart. Do dogs have souls? I don't know. Well, what's a soul? How do I measure a soul? Ding, 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 right? That was the point. You can't test this. Cats make the best pets. Okay, so I have evidence. They're quiet. They're clean. They self-clean. I can leave him alone for a day. He loves me when I'm there. He's not too mad when I come back. He's quiet. I don't have to take him out at 5 o'clock in the morning in Massachusetts when it's snowing in February. Okay, it's still an opinion, right? I may have evidence for that opinion, but it doesn't mean it's true. It's not an objective claim. It's subjective. And again, just putting that delineation in your brain, some of our most strongly held beliefs are based on things like subjective values. And we try really hard to protect those. And we do it with finding evidence to support it. But what you want to ask yourself is, can I even prove this wrong? Conspiracy theorists are a prime example of ad hoc excuse making. They do everything they can to protect their claim. So missing evidence was hidden. Contradictory evidence was planted. There's always an excuse. What that's doing is moving a goalpost and protecting a claim from being falsified, right? So we can even take a falsifiable claim and protect it by continually making excuses. So falsifiability. Next is logic. So scientific argument should be logical. And there's different ways to approach this. In class, I do talk about how to break down the structure of an argument between its conclusion and its supporting premises. What kind of argument is it, right? Is it deductive or inductive? This is one of those that even a lot of skeptics get wrong, and I did for a while too. Deductive arguments are those that are conclusive. If the premises are true, the conclusion has to follow. Whereas an inductive argument is always probabilistic. And in science, theories are inductive reasoning. They're never going to be conclusive. It doesn't mean they're not true. It doesn't mean that we don't have enough evidence to accept them. But it does mean that it's a different type of argument. The quick and dirty, and I know philosophers disagree on some of this too, but I find it really helpful, are the logical fallacies. And there's like 1 trillion of them, and they each have multiple names, and they're all related to other ones, and there's always these minute differences that separate. I've got about 10 to 15 that I think are pretty common, and if you can see them, it doesn't mean the claim is wrong, but it does mean there might be a problem with the claim. So in the example here, the conclusion is that we should ban GMOs, and the rest of those are premises to support that conclusion. But all of the premises commit different fallacies, right? So they're not natural. Right? That's an appeal to nature fallacy. Just because it's natural doesn't mean it's good, or vice versa. Millions oppose them. Lots of people can be wrong. That's a bandwagon. Our ancestors didn't eat them. An appeal to tradition. Food allergies increased with GMOs. False cause, mistaken correlation for causation. Oh, the shill argument. I can't tell you the number of times I've been accused of being a shill, and I literally don't make any money from doing this stuff online. My check is forever lost in the mail, but it's a great way to discount what somebody else is saying. It's super easy. Oh, you're just a shill. Right, that's an ad hominem. Also, the graphic, that's an appeal to emotion. It's scary looking. So teaching students these basic logical fallacies can be really helpful for them to see really basic flaws in arguments. This rule is the hardest of all of them, and it hides in the middle, and it's easy to overlook. But the reason that we fall for misinformation is often us, right? We can lie to ourselves. Richard Feynman, you were the easiest person to fool. That is so true. So often what we do is get into this cycle where we think something is true, and we form that belief in different ways. Maybe we heard it someplace. Now I can find evidence for it everywhere, right? I'm constantly seeing evidence to support it. And if it's really important to me, like if it's an identity-defining issue, then I'm really motivated to find more evidence to support it. And that cycle then leads me to be overconfident. Daniel Kahneman was once asked if he had a magic wand and could rid the world of one bias, what would it be? He said overconfidence. You can't learn or change your mind. You can't be open to new evidence when you're overconfident. And we have to know ourselves, because what's happening is that overconfidence is driven by some underlying desire to believe or not to believe. So for example, I've got this graphic here of we think often what we're doing is we formed our conclusions by following evidence, using logic. Of course our beliefs are rational. We are rational people. Often what we do though, we start from a desired conclusion. And the more we want that to be true or not true, the better able we are to cherry pick evidence and maintain that conclusion, and then be overconfident. Pseudoscience and science denial are the poster children in misinformation for this, because pseudoscience is driven by a desire to believe, whereas science denial is driven by a desire to not believe. So you are the only person who can prevent yourself from being fooled. So don't overlook this rule. Alternative explanations. How else can I explain my experience? My experience with homeopathy, because I use it in class, is that students have no idea what it is. They just don't know. When asked, they think it's natural medicine. When I explain to them what it is, they are incredulous. You're kidding. That doesn't make any sense. Nope. Right, okay. So I explain it. It's impossible for it to work. Studies show it doesn't work. That's great. Let's say I have a headache. I get a lot of migraines. I get a headache. I take a homeopathic remedy, hypericum here, which is St. John's wort. My headache goes away. Does that mean the homeopathy worked? Okay, let's propose other explanations. Maybe I was stressed. Maybe I was tired. Maybe I was hungry. I mean, all of my triggers. Let's go through those. Occam's razor is often misused as well. It is not the simplest explanation, because the simplest explanation could be, it's a conspiracy, or God did it. Those are simple, but they require huge new assumptions. In this case, it would require a gigantic new assumption that homeopathy could treat my migraine. Like, for example, water having memory. We don't know that to be true, but we do know that you can get tired, get a migraine, and the migraine goes away on its own. Or there's placebo effects. So think of as many different ways as you can to explain your observation, and then whittle them away. Now, you're not going to end up with a conclusion that's definitively true, but it's the one that's most likely. Conclusions can always change. This is a really hard one for students because they're used to considering knowledge as black or white, right or wrong. It's true or it's not true. And when we're talking about these inductive arguments, theories and so on, they can never be proven. So we talk about how skepticism is proportioning the evidence to the conclusion to the evidence that you have. So if I have some evidence, I'm going to increase uncertainty. I'm going to allow myself to change my mind, move back and forth. In science, when we say it's a theory, we don't mean it's just a theory, right? We mean this is as sure as we're going to get with explanations. Can it change? Yes, and that's a good thing, right? Being able to change your mind with evidence is commendable. It shows humility. It shows intellectual honesty. This game here is wonderful. Cranky Uncle, the cognitive scientist John Cook, which you might know from Skeptical Science. Actually, I saw him earlier, the consensus studies. Was that Professor Dave that had that up? Right, so John Cook. He's also a cartoonist, and he has this wonderful game where, you know who Cranky Uncle is, right? You get the person in your mind. All right, so that guy is a science denier. And he uses the techniques of science denial to try to deceive you in the game. It's free online, it's awesome, students love it. All of them are different, the techniques are fallacies. They're using fake experts or appealing to conspiracy or logical fallacies. And one of the favorites of science deniers is impossible expectations. Have you proven it with 100% certainty? Do we know absolutely for sure what the global temperature is going to be in 100 years? Can you tell me with 100% certainty that I'm not going to have any side effects from a vaccine? Right? So that's an impossible expectation. Science deniers like to really use it. But the point here is proportioning evidence to a conclusion is commendable, and we do not need to hold out for impossible standards of proof to be able to accept something. Evidence gives us reasons to accept a claim, and I've broken down evidence into a few different things here. So first, is the evidence reliable? Is it like a random YouTube video? Is it from a subreddit? Is it from the journal Nature? Right, all of those have different levels of reliability. I teach my students to, when possible, look for the expert consensus, because at any given time, that is the most reliable source of information. This graphic here is from the Logic of Science. Does a great job showing how, even within scientific studies, they don't all provide the same kind of evidence. So meta-analyses and systematic reviews provide a bigger picture, so they're more reliable than something like an animal study. If I wanted to make the claim to you that water was harmful, I could do so. Again, this is a great example of everybody laughed at this, right? It was not polarizing in any way. I didn't trigger anybody here. And you all got to see the absolute absurdity of cherry-picking evidence. So when considering evidence for a claim, what does the big picture say? Don't look at the individual studies. And along those lines, beware single study syndrome. So in science, you've got this huge body of knowledge that's building over time. And this stuff at its foundation is much more supported and less likely to change. But it's being used to generate new knowledge. And as we get closer and closer to the edges, that's the stuff that's sexy for news, right? It's the new study says this, and cancer can cure, or study shows this can cure cancer. And when you look really closely, it's in petri dishes. Be careful of single studies. You can mislead yourself on Google Scholar just as easily as you can on Google, because our biases lead us to search for what we want to believe. When I was a kid, it's Halloween, so I have to do this. When I was a kid, I saw a ghost. So my grandma was staying over, and she was sleeping in the bed next to me. I must have been, I'm guessing, 5 or 6. And I woke to this fingernail going up my arm, really slowly. And I woke up, and there was this old woman there. She had like straggly gray hair. I was terrified. So I tried to yell at my grandma to wake me up. There's a ghost here. I need protection. I couldn't scream. She covered my mouth. She held my chest down. Damn it, I will get that. It was cold. I remember how cold her hands were and how terrified I was. Okay, who here knows what that is? Sleep paralysis. Yes. Today I know what that is. Oh, by the way, what happens in sleep paralysis is, if you don't know what it is, your brain is awake, but your body yet can't move. So your brain is searching for reasons why you can't move. Throughout history, there have been demons and witches and succubi and mass murderers and alien abductions. I was 5, so I saw the witch from the Snow White. She was terrifying. If I didn't know any better, I would still be telling a story about how I saw a real ghost. This is a really hard concept for students. We don't realize how much our personal experiences can fool us. We don't realize, I took homeopathy and it worked. Why is that not solid evidence? Or, I know UFOs are real. I saw one. How do we know that's not? good enough evidence. Okay? So this is why anecdotes are never sufficient, especially for extraordinary claims like ghosts. A few more examples. Do you remember this? Okay, I'm not going to speculate alternative explanations, but I have a couple. This is a great example. Phil Plait did a great story on this. So in Denver, this was 2009, there was UFOs flying over the middle of the city in the middle of the day. And people were like, oh my God, UFOs. This guy had the camera from his house, a security camera, so they put it on the news. And everybody's looking for these UFOs taking off and landing in the middle of the day, in the middle of the city, where nobody else saw them. They were insects. In the middle of the day, flying in the hot sun, right? So even video evidence is not sufficient. And finally, replicability. So we just saw this earlier. You all know who this is. He claimed that the MMR vaccine, the trivalent vaccine, was causing autism, is really the birth of modern anti-vaccine misinformation, and he made it up. Right? We know now he had strong financial incentives, he forged data, he's been disbarred, he doesn't have his medical license anymore. It can take a long time for this stuff to come out in the wash, but nature is consistent. If what we're trying to do with science is find objective reality is a thing, it does not change, its patterns and so on, so if something is wrong, it's us. Someone made a mistake, someone lied, and this is how we find it. And along those lines, one study is never enough, right? So what we want to be able to do is to have strong scientific consensuses. What lines of evidence support it? And the more lines of evidence that are continually supporting this conclusion, the better more justified we are in accepting it. So the article is available in Skeptical Inquirer. I also realized that my students are wonderful, but there's a whole world of students. And I would completely concur with Professor Dave that we need more of us out there trying to educate the public about these basic things. So that's why I use fun colors and silly examples like farting. Welcome back from lunch. Thank you.